Hi everyone, today I want to talk about my wishlist for Diablo 4 Season 4. So Season 3 has been out for a little while now, we have been playing it, and we do know that a few really dramatic changes are coming to the game in Season 4 already. For example, the itemization rework, most likely the codex update. If you don't know anything about those, well, the game is about to shift in a pretty big way, and I expect Season 4 to be a pretty big turning point for the game. But outside of that, I feel there are a lot of low-hanging fruits out there that I just want to talk about right now in this video. I have a little document prepared here that I just put together basically in a few minutes off the top of my head, based on a lot of the discussions that I've had on stream with my community, with just things that I think could improve the game. So I want to go through those points here. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, but I think a lot of kind of like small or easy fixes that could improve the game overall a lot, in addition to the stuff that's already coming. So I hope that the D4 team is taking some notes here, if they have not already done so beforehand, or if, you know, these are some new points. But in general, I also want to just gather more feedback and, you know, see what we can actually deliver to the devs as kind of like a community and see what they can take out of this. As I mentioned, we already know a few things coming in Season 4, or at least some things are likely. I'm not sure if this is confirmed with the codex rework, for example, but aspects are going to be not itemized anymore. They're only in the codex, and this means you can always imprint whatever you want, and you don't have to deal with like so much stash issues and these kind of things. So this is really cool. The itemization reworks are going to be massive, so I'm really looking forward to those. I have seen a very early preview, and a lot of other content creators have seen it already, like some time ago. It did look really cool. It did sound pretty cool, so I'm excited for that, but I have no idea of the status of this right now. And then of course you're gonna get items, theme, etc. But honestly, I really don't care too much about this part here in particular, with how big the changes are going to be in Season 4 anyway. I think the theme could actually be somewhat of a, you know, afterthought in my book. But I guess you're gonna see something cool there again. Now let's talk about the stuff I actually want. So one thing that has definitely shown to be a problem is the Uber grind. So you have to farm Duriel like hundreds, even thousands of times when people do that, at least with dupe mats. That is somewhat realistic. Now, well, dupes are gone, and in general, the Uber grind is just boring at some point. So it's fine to do the Duriel grind, you know, every so often for a little bit, but personally, I found like around 400 or so Duriels last season, and that was in a rotation, of course. So, you know, I found up like around 100 Duriels myself, and then multiplied them by times 4 in a party, and that is quite a grind. And now in Season 3, we also have the same Uber grind yet again. Now, there are some improvements coming to that very soon, I guess. Blizzard has already teased that we're gonna see, like, you know, we're gonna get something for the Uber Unix. But in the grand scheme of things, I guess it's still gonna be the same old Duriel grind unless something major changes here. And I think we need something better. First of all, this needs to be more solo player friendly. Like, we need a way for solo players to, at least at a somewhat acceptable efficiency, farm up those Uber Unix and not be forced to go 4-man Duriel grind. So that is the main point here. And also the second point is, we only have this one source of Ubers, really. We have no other bosses. Like, why don't they just make like some actual hard mode bosses of all of the bosses that we have? Like, you know, we have Vashan, we have Grigar, etc. And in my opinion, they could all drop like maybe 1 or 2 of those, and then you can actually kind of, you know, target one of them and actually grind exactly the Uber that you want for your build, and not have everything on one boss where it's like full RNG and you get lucky or you don't. So I think that could definitely change very easily, actually, just by making like, you know, a hard mode of all of those bosses, like a level 100 version, or even like higher than that, like a 125 version or so, you know, something that has like 20 times the HP, 10 times the damage, and, you know, is actually a bit of an encounter instead of you just walking in and one-shotting them. So there could be relatively easy solutions, I think, to this, and I think it's just a missed opportunity here. Also, similar, the T100 dungeons in the game right now are completely irrelevant with the changes in Season 3. So right now we get higher level loot in higher level nightmare dungeons up until around level 90. In fact, even a bit before that, like even if you farm 85, for example, you're basically guaranteed 925 loot every single item, and there's not really a change in the loot anymore. So the last like 15, even up to 20 levels of difficulty are completely irrelevant right now. And I think that T100 should be a nice goal to have, a nice, you know, like try to make your character strong enough to farm those kind of scenario. So I would really like to see something like an Uber drop chance for T100 Nightmare Dungeons. This would be solo player friendly, as I had just described, but also it would actually give some relevance to gearing up your character strong enough, making a build powerful enough so it can blast through those T100s. And if it's like, only on T100, there's like this, this guaranteed, like, you get the guaranteed sigils of T100 every time you complete one, for example, and you can kind of like, perpetuate the grind like this and keep blasting until you get something. So I think this would be a relatively easy solution, just put like Ubers in Nightmare Dungeons. Now, there's another big topic here, and that is old seasonal content. So I think it's a kind of big waste that we don't really have any leftovers of the previous season themes in the game. Okay, we have Varshan, there's like a one boss fight, and he's kind of irrelevant. And all the other stuff is kind of just gone. The Bloodseekers are gone, the Blood Tide is gone, the Million Tunnels are gone, and I expect the Vaults will be gone. So I just put this on the list here as well. And I think that is not how it works. So in my book, I think we should get back all of the stuff in Season 4. For example, Bloodseekers. I think Bloodseekers were amazing in Season 2. Like when they popped up in a dungeon and they were hunting you down, and they were actually dangerous events. They were like, these super powerful elites. It was kind of cool, and especially because they scaled with the difficulty of the dungeon, they were actually like an interesting encounter, which is something that is really lacking in Diablo 4 right now. Like, okay, there's the Butcher, and then there's the Son of Malphas, and outside of that, there's no real like randomness, something like, crazy happening, something like, oh shit moment, basically. And Bloodseekers were exactly that, and they were excellent at this. And we do have Lord Zir as a boss in the game, and there is basically a reward that you can attach to those Bloodseekers, which is Lord Zir summoning materials, for example. So there could be a specific purpose to trying to actually defeat those Bloodseekers instead of just running away from them, for example. I think this is something that should be in the game, at least bring back the Bloodseekers. Lord Zir is still there, so you could tie it in lore-wise if you really want or something. And I think this would be an excellent solution, give people actually like a chance to target farm some of those Lord Zir mods at the same time, because right now Lord Zir is definitely a problem for people that want an item from that boss. And we just get something other, like some new cool stuff to do sometimes in those Nightmare Dungeons. In general, I think Nightmare Dungeons definitely need a lot more of the seasonal content in them, including the old seasonal content, because ultimately Nightmare Dungeons with the scaling difficulty are the only real content that we have right now, after you have decked out your character, after you are level 100 and you have everything. The outdoor content is just, irrelevant, like not in the sense that it's not useful to farm it because, Helltide exists and stuff like that, but in terms of difficulty. And the only real challenge you can have is in Nightmare Dungeons. So I think this stuff needs to go into the dungeons, and Bloodseekers are a perfect example here. And similar, we can have these old like Blood Seeker or these Blood Harvest events, for example, in dungeons. We had some back in Season 2. There were these vampire events that popped up here and there, and similar to those Bloodseekers, for example, they could drop those Zir summoning materials. And when you walk into a room and there's this event, then you can decide, okay, do I actually want to do this event or just want to skip it, go to the end, get my Glyph XP? And you actually have a bit of a choice to target farm a certain thing. Because right now, all these like dungeon events, yeah, they have been buffed and they're kind of nice for XP, but XP doesn't really matter anymore at some point, and then they don't give you anything. And I think we need more of this kind of like, choice in the dungeons. Okay, I see this event. Am I going to do it or not? I see these Bloodseekers. Would I try to fight them or just run away from them? And they can actually give you a specific, tangible and especially important reward. And well, the same with like the other seasonal themes here. So Millennium Tunnels, for example. I think it would be amazing if you walk into a Nightmare Dungeon and sometimes it's just like a Millennium Dungeon or something. This could literally be just an affix on the sigil as well. It could literally just say like the extra shrines, this is infested with malignant growths or whatever, and similar with the Bloodseekers, infested with vampires. And this could be, even target farmable in that sense. And you walk into these Nightmare Dungeons, and then you have, maybe somewhere where there's usually like an event room. It just leads to a Millennium Tunnel. It's like a little like side area that you go into, and there's like 10 of those malignant elites, and every time you defeat one of them, there's like a 25% chance to drop one of the Varshan organs that you can use to summon the boss, for example. So again, similar to the Bloodseekers, I would like to actually have a reason to go and do those side events and, you know, find something interesting in those dungeons that is outside of just like blasting straight to the boss and that's it. And I think this is extremely low-hanging fruit here that we should get in the game. And likewise with the vaults, I don't know exactly what they could do, but I think it would be a waste to just throw them away. I think the Malphas fight is kind of interesting, and we should definitely keep Malphas in the game. And for that reason, I would also like to see the vaults. So, for example, maybe next season when you no longer have vaults as a season theme, maybe just like 1 in 20 Nightmare Dungeon sigils you find is randomly a vault sigil, and it's going to be at the same tier of, you know, the Nightmare Dungeon that you're running, for example. And then you can open this up and you can get Malphas mats and to summon Malphas in those vaults. So let's say you start the run and you get a bunch of these Sultan Vault stacks, just like now. And let's say, okay, there's 15 stacks you need to have at the end of the run. Maybe you get 30 at the start, so you have to try to avoid the traps a little bit, but it's not like super try hard. And then you go and get a few of those rewards at the end, depending on how many stacks you kept. I think this would also be extremely easy to keep around. And we have Malphas as an extra endgame boss that is like similar level as like Duriel, for example, in terms of difficulty. And I really like the Malphas fight. So you just put a bunch of new uniques on Malphas, you have these vaults, and there you go. I think that would be cool. So I think there's really no reason to kind of like throw away all of the old season themes. I think they should really come back, and especially a lot of the stuff needs to go into Nightmare Dungeons just to beef up that content and make it much more interesting. So there's definitely like more things you could do. But obviously we don't want to have like, you know, a full rainbow of, you know, Bloodtide, Helltide, whatever on the map active at all times with arcane tremors and all that stuff. That is a bit too much. So there should definitely be like, you know, a bigger focus on the actual season itself. But some of this old stuff can come back, and quite easily so. So this is kind of what I wanted to explain here with some ideas I had. Then we have the next point here, Helltides Brush Up. I was actually expecting this to happen in Season 3 already. After the massive success of the Blood Harvest in Season 2, I expected the dev team to just like sit down and just like do something with Helltide. Because it turns out, yeah, Helltide is more rewarding. We get Forgotten Souls now, and, you know, the chest is easier to get, and you see them on the map and you can farm it all the time. That's kind of nice. But ultimately, I think Helltide needs a bit of a revamp. So it just needs more exciting stuff, basically. Like Blood Harvest was fun because there were those siphons, there were those Bloodseekers you could summon. There was always something going on, there were whispers. It was just nice, you know, it was kind of complete. And Helltide is, you know, it doesn't feel very hellish most of the time. Okay, you have like the fire raining down, and there's a bunch more extra demons and stuff. But ultimately, the difficulty is very low. There's nothing going on. Kickstart is a joke. It's just a punching bag that is annoying and nothing else. So at the very minimum, Kickstart, you know, could deal like triple the damage and have no days maybe. So that would be great. And just in general, you know, maybe there's like some portals popping up similar to those vampire siphons from Blood Harvest, for example. And you go there, you activate the portal, there's like, you know, 200 demons charging out and you have to defend against them. Or, you know, there's like some mini boss that spawns that is actually like highlighted on the map. And, you know, every so often there's like one of those bosses appearing and he drops like 50 cinders and 10 forgotten souls. And then everyone rushes there and try to get it or something. I think there just needs to be more stuff going on basically in Helltide. It's, you know, not enough density, not enough fun, not enough difficulty. I really wouldn't mind if like the monster level is also raised a bit more. It's only like +3 of the regular. I think it could easily be +5 or even +10. So it actually also is somewhat relevant for experience farm, for example, and just feels a bit more like threatening. So this is mostly what's missing here. There's nothing really that interrupts the grind a little bit, you know, something like a butcher in a dungeon, for example. So we need something, and we need it fast, I think, especially with Helltide being so important for the game as it is. Then a very minor fix here, but very important one in my opinion. Separate inventory for sigils. The consumable tab is just, you know, piling up more and more stuff with all the consumable, like boss materials, for example. And we might get more next season for the new bosses and for Malphas and whatever. And I don't understand why this is not a thing already. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory here. Just give us a Sigil Inventory, please. Thank you. Then solo self-found tag. So I'm not really sure if this will make it into the game in Season 4 or not, but I just wanted to put this out here because I feel this would be also a somewhat small solution, but something that would make many people, including myself, very happy, and would also allow much more easily to run community events. So this is the main reason why I actually want to put this on this list here, for kind of like a I want this early and not in 3 years kind of thing. So solo self-found is the way of life for many players that either don't want to play with friends or don't have friends to play with, or, you know, it's just like how they roll. And if there's any kind of option like that, I think a lot of people would really appreciate this. So this means no trading and no grouping, and it doesn't really need like any extra rewards or anything like that. It just needs to have this tag. You need to have like a separate stash for that character, for example, so you can't take it from your original stash. But outside of that, it doesn't really need all that much to work already. And this would be, you know, immensely helpful, especially for, you know, the community events, for races, for any kind of stuff like that, just to like have very easy verification methods and just to like show off your achievements as a solo player. Because, yeah, let's face it, Diablo 4 is a very easy game, and I understand why. And I hope that in the future we're gonna get more high-end stuff, and I guess we will. But in the grand scheme of things, just showing off that you have done everything by yourself with this one character is just a really cool thing to do and something to strive towards for players. So this is why we need this. Then we have world bosses and legions. So this is another point here. I feel like they're just like undertuned, and okay, it's kind of nice to just go there and, you know, have some easy grind and get some reward for it. But ultimately, I feel like they are just like, yeah, too boring, to be honest. Like, especially world bosses, like they either just get one shot, or even if they don't kill them very fast, they're just not threatening at all. There's like these big massive demons that appear, and in World Tier 1 and World Tier 2 they actually wreck you. Like when you're like level 30, you go there, you can actually get one tapped or two tapped by those bosses, and then you go to World Tier 4 and it just feels like they do the same damage as on World Tier 2. Like it just doesn't do anything to my character. Like there's no way to die in World Tier 4, I feel. Like, even if my armor is not capped, like, these guys just don't hurt you, really. So it's just kind of strange how they stop scaling, or just they don't scale enough with, like, the actual defenses that the higher level character has. So I think that needs to be, like, revamped a little bit. The game just, in general, gets easier as you go. But also, I think world bosses, you know, being those kind of massive demons, massive threats, I think they should just, you know, be a bit more beefed up, to be honest. Especially on the damage side. And maybe the rewards as well, of course, why not? And lastly, I have this here, buff Whispers XP in World Tier 1 and 2. This is mostly just for the early game, for the early leveling. Whenever you start a fresh character, I always tell people, go domain tunnels, and, you know, maybe do the seasonal quest line, of course. But this is basically the meta right now. It's domain tunnels or what, or bust. And even if they nerf that dungeon in particular, we're gonna find the next best dungeon. They're gonna go to Uldra's Cave or whatever. So ultimately, I feel like I just want to level Whispers, and it's just not competitive. And there's also no reason to do Whispers. You know, we don't get any Varsha mats in World Tier 2, for example, and that's okay. But I'd at least like to do something more than just domain tunnels. So in Season 1, for example, they removed the Renown grind. And personally, I was a pretty big Renown enjoyer because it just gave you something to do at the season start. Like, I was actually going around to different places, to different dungeons, and I actually saw a lot of the game there. And now I only see like one dungeon and the seasonal quest line. And I think that's kind of a mistake with this big, expansive game that we have. So I would like to see Whispers buffed. I would like to see maybe some other new stuff there that would be rewarding, and to do like something to do at the low levels as well that actually helps the character progress later. And lastly, I want to talk about some other stuff here, stretch targets. So just something that I believe is most likely not making it into Season 4, but I just want to like reiterate this here as a long-term goal perhaps for the devs, and as something that I think a lot of people would also like to see. Number one, I guess it's pretty obvious, loot filters. Now, it seems like to me that the 4 team has the idea that with the itemization changes, we don't need a loot filter, but I think ultimately we still really want a loot filter. So I think this is just inevitable, especially with power creep coming in, especially with new content and, you know, new rewarding stuff coming in and so on. And just in general, like if you have a decked out level 100 character, you don't want to go around and just, you know, pick up items anymore at some point, or at least not most of them. So if they keep going with this kind of like vomit items at you at the end of a vault run, for example, and like the entire inventory is full of stuff. So unless you get like a massive reduction, like 80-90% reduction in loot, I think we need loot filters. And as the game matures and we get more and more different items, etc., we need them, I think. So it is definitely something that should make its way into the game, regardless of how the itemization system works in the end, I believe. And this could even be like something relatively simple, and it needs to be inside the game. I think Last Epoch is a good example here. They have built a pretty badass in-game loot filter system that is easy to use, easy to understand, and it just allows for a lot of customization with, you know, a few minutes of investment. And we don't even need anything remotely as complicated as that because of Diablo 4's loot system just being like, you know, way tuned down in complexity. So even something very simple could help us out a lot here. Then we have loadouts. I think this is like also a pretty major request. So I'm just gonna like say this real quick. Diablo 3 had the option to save an entire build and then you can swap between them on your character. So that is kind of cool. And a lot of people want that in Diablo 4. And well, right now it wouldn't really work, I guess, just with the way the game works because of the aspects, etc. But especially with this coming to the game, the codex rework, and basically every single item that you have being like almost like a kind of cube slot, basically, I think we could definitely see loadouts. So maybe you do like a one-time payment to purchase a loadout slot, or, you know, maybe there's like a small fee for like, you know, swapping your loadout every time so that you can't abuse it for like just respecking for free all the time. But I think ultimately we need something like that just to go in town, you know, with a click of a button, and then you change your build and you can like actually save multiple things at once. So that would be amazing and something that I think a lot of people would appreciate. And lastly, World Tier 5. I don't want to go the Diablo 3 route with, you know, making Torment 16 and all that stuff. But I think one extra difficulty would definitely be useful for the game. Something where it's like a bit more challenging in general, something where it's a bit more rewarding in general. For example, I just put this number here, Tier 80 Nightmare Dungeon difficulty. Do not put it like to the highest difficulty in the game, like T100 dungeons. But no, the thing is that currently, if I do ever like any kind of Helltide farming, any kind of Whisper farming, like it's all useless trash items that I find in those types of content because they are not Tier 90 Nightmare Dungeons or Tier 80 plus Nightmare Dungeons. Like right now, it's so easy to acquire 925 loot, and all the stuff I find in open world is not 925 or anywhere remotely close to that. And it's also just like, at some point, you're just overpowering the content so hard that all you care about is like go fast, go speedy, and everything just explodes on the screen. And you can even make that happen all the way up to Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon difficulty with the right build these days. So I think that just beefing up the outdoor content, also giving like, you know, this kind of like, you know, higher level, you know, bosses, or these you know, hard mode versions of the bosses, and actually some place. I think World Tier 5 could be a really good opportunity here to have like, you know, the Uber Varshan, Uber Gigar, etc. And all those bosses have a chance to drop Uber bosses, Uber uniques, for example. Maybe the Whispers, you know, every time an organ drops, there's like a 25% chance to get an extra organ. Every time that you find a Forgotten Soul, there's a 25% chance to get an extra Forgotten Soul. You know, just something to give you a bit of an incentive to actually go into World Tier 5. It doesn't need to have like a new tier of items like Ancestrals or, you know, Uber Ancestrals or whatever. It just needs to have, you know, not monsters that just die one shot to everything, and just a bit more rewards, basically. So this is something I would like to see here. Yeah, and this also wraps it up. So as I mentioned, this is just a small list that I made here, but something where I think, you know, a lot of like kind of easy fixes, kind of like a few ideas I want to throw out there. Of course, I'm not really involved with the development process. I don't really know what they have planned with, you know, all the details. I know a few things, but just some stuff that I think should make its way into the game if I could decide. So let me know what you think. Maybe you have more to add to this list. Maybe there's, you know, some other things that you would like to see short term. This is kind of like a short term list here that I made. And of course, you know, we want 1,000 things in this game. And over time, I think they will arrive. This is what I think should happen first. So that's it for this video here. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts, and let's see what happens. And see you guys next time.